Hello, everyone. Good morning. I hope that you are all doing good and, of course, safe. If you can still remember our previous lesson, we discussed all about what? Very good. We discussed all about the different types of communication. And in that particular video lecture, we learned that it is very important for us to listen attentively, for us to communicate well, and at the same time for us to give appropriate feedback. But what if you will be in a situation wherein you have to communicate to a particular individual whose cultural background is different from your cultural background? What will you do? Of course, even if it's quite challenging, you really have to connect regardless of your diversity because you wanted to communicate, you wanted to connect with them. And that will be our lesson for today. Intercultural communication. It's not just an ordinary communication, but we are talking about across borders, communicating across the different parts of the world. Our main lesson will be communication and globalization and the developmental model of cultural sensitivity. So, sir, what is globalization? Globalization is a situation in which available goods and services or social and cultural influences gradually become similar in all parts of the world. Who among you here loves K-pop? BTS, 21. We have Blackpink, di ba? So a lot of you loves these K-pop because you are already part of their culture. You have already adapted and you have been being influenced already by their culture, and that's what globalization is all about. The K-pop community does not only influence the Korean community, or the K-pop culture does not only influence the Korean community, but also what? The different cultures across the globe, including our culture here in the Philippines. Globalization also is a process by which people and goods move across borders. So it's a matter of exchanging of goods and services, import and export of goods and services. So, sir, how did globalization happen? So, globalization or the phenomenon of globalization is a primitive form in which humans first settled down into the different parts of the world. Diha gyud nagsugod ang globalization when humans they started to travel and they settled in the different parts of the world. Sir, what drives globalization? So the history of globalization is driven by several factors, including we have technology, we have transportation, and for a while, international cooperation. So when we say international cooperation class, it encompasses all professional activities, non-professional activities aiming to support people in need and promote cultural, social, and even economic development of a certain country. So sir, what's good about it? 'Di ba? So unsa kay maayo sa globalization? Naabay maayo sa globalization? Of course, because it allows companies to lower cost ways to produce their products. So ilang mangita sila paagi nga makita sila og lower cost ways for them to produce multiple products. Okay? And at the same time, since tayo gitawag nga global competition, they try to lower down their prices. And when a certain company lower down their price, another company will follow, and that's global competition, resulting for us consumers to have a larger variety of choices. So, mas advantage sa atong consumer. Sir, if na siya advantage, na ba siya disadvantage? So what's bad about it? Of course, sadly, globalization has been linked to different environmental challenges, many of which is very serious, including deforestation and loss of biodiversity caused by economic specialization and, of course, infrastructure development. So everything has pros and cons, the same with globalization. For us consumers, it is very advantage kasi they will try to lower their prices and it will lead for us to have a larger variety of choices. Okay? They will try to lower their prices. Companies will lower their prices and then for us, daghan tay papilian. However, since we're talking about companies, they have to develop infrastructure from left to right, from everywhere, diba? Developing. So that's really a disadvantage, especially when we talk about the loss in biodiversity. The diversity of people and culture impacts communication. Of course, we cannot easily communicate, class, if we are not in the same culture because we really have to understand their culture first before we talk about them, before we have our opinions about them. That's why tolerance is an absolute must. We have to respect each other's culture, each other's differences, especially everyone's opinion. They really matter. So we have the communication across culture. These are the types. First, we have high context versus low context, sequential versus synchronic, and affective versus neutral. Let's talk about high context versus low context. So people belonging in high context culture, they communicate in a vague manner, not clear, vague, and then they are implicit. So, ang mga tao gani nga belong ani nga culture, high context culture, ang ilang communication dili klaro. They are very vague. Diba? So, yung ana. Low context, so people belonging in a low context culture, when they communicate, is the exact opposite of high context kasi they are very clear, simple, explicit. So, therefore, easily to be understood. Then people belonging in sequential culture, when they work, especially in a workplace communication, they try to work one at a time. So they try to follow a certain plan. They have to write a plan and then they have a strong preference to that particular plan. So ilagay na siyang i-follow whatever happens. While synchronic, people belonging in a synchronic culture is the exact opposite of sequential culture. Kasi if sa sequential na ay plan, they do not plan because they think that time is flexible. And at the same time, they try to work a lot compare ani. Kanang if si sequential is one at a time, kani daghan at a time. Di ba? Many or more than one at a time. Then affective versus neutral. So affective, people belonging in an affective culture, kaniha culture, when they communicate, they are very expressive. They try to express themselves, they try to show or to tell what they really feel. So they are very affective. This neutral is the exact opposite. Kay they don't want to show their feelings. Okay? For example, in our culture as Filipino, di ba, we're very caring, we're very thoughtful. However, in other culture, we cannot say that they are also there. They should be affectionate, they should be caring, and they should be thoughtful too. Dili ta makaingon ana because no two person is alike. Same with no culture is the same. Now, let's move to the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity. So, the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity describes 6 developmental stages. So, what are these 6 developmental stages? Denial, defense, minimization, acceptance, adaptation, and integration. So the developmental model of intercultural sensitivity is also called Bennett scale. Bennett scale. Okay? So let's talk about denial. So sa denial class, you do not recognize that your culture is different from others' culture. So, gideny nimo ang existence sa usa ka culture. So, you are not well aware of their differences, of their similarities, alright? So, wala ka kabalungan ay cultural differences. So, munang denial. Ang defense class, you have a short understanding, you have a minimal understanding of one's culture, however, in a negative manner. Okay? So you see it as a negative way. For example, you try to build your defense because you think that they are a threat to your culture, then that culture is a threat to your culture. So, muna siya kitawag na defense. So, you mag-build ka defense. Next, minimization class is you're unaware of projection of own cultural values. Therefore, you see your own value as superior. Wala ka kabalo nga ang i-project na dahil nimo is superior na imong value, superior na ang value sa imong culture than any other culture. Or imong gi-minimize ang other culture para ikaw mahimong superior. So the term is minimize. So minimization. Next is acceptance. Acceptance is another developmental stages. Dire, you try to shift your understanding that the same ordinary behavior can have different meanings in different cultures. So you slowly understand then that particular ordinary behavior of you could mean different given a different also culture. For example, this a hand gesture could mean we are okay, di ba? So are you okay? Yes, I'm okay, I'm good. However, in a different culture, in a context of a different culture, this means asking money. So if nana ka sa acceptance stage, you should be very careful of using this hand gesture because it could mean something to to other culture. Diba? So that's acceptance. Huwag na kay self-assessment ba nga, oy, this should not be used kay maka-offend ta yung ana. Then let's move to adaptation. For a while, yeah. Adaptation, you can already evaluate others' behavior from their frame of reference. Therefore, you try to fit sa given norm. So naka sa acceptance stage, therefore, you already accepted that other culture is unique and you don't have to argue about it and you don't have to kaning be threatened about their culture, but you have to understand their culture and learn from their culture for you to adapt their culture. And lastly, dili ilang enough class nga mo adapt we have to integrate. For example, ako, I am from Mindanao, from Caraga, tapos ato dayon ko og Amerika. I have to integrate what I have learned here sa akong stay sa Amerika. Dili kay pag uli na ko diri I don't know how to speak Bisaya na. It's because it's been a while since ni uli ko diri sa Kabadbaran kay Bali, maging ana ba. So dapat you already know how to integrate if na ka diri sa integration na stage. So those are the different stages in developmental cultural sensitivity class. It is very important because we really have to understand each other's culture. We have to take note that no two person is alike, therefore no two culture is alike. Therefore, tolerance is an absolute must. We should not think our culture is superior than above than anyone else or sila inferior dili. There should dapat walay comparison. We should not give label. We have to foster understanding class so that we can communicate well given a different cultural background. Alright? So I hope that you have learned a lot from this lecture. Thank you so much for listening and see you next week for our next lesson.